Chapter 13. The Greatest of Men and Kings.
You can take the goggles off now.
Ally lifted the goggles away from her eyes. She was surprised to see it was still dark, and she was now standing at the base of the large palm tree she saw before. The landscape around her was illuminated by the whitewash of a full moon across a sea of palm trees and small, pointed bushes among the dry sand. Removing the goggles from her head, Ally looked up to the night sky and was glad to see the moon, realizing how much she had missed its ambient glow. Sem knelt and began rubbing the side of his leg. He was trying his best to keep his weight off it, only his limp was now more pronounced than it had been before they left.
You all right?
Fine,
Sem replied, resting his back against the palm tree. Turning around, Ally saw all that was left of the gateway they had passed through. A small, bright light, no bigger than a penny, remained suspended in midair.
Is that the Ark?
Yeah, that star's our only way home. We'll have to make it back here with enough time,
said Sem. He slung his bag off his shoulder and began sorting through it.
So, where are we?
Asked Ally, looking around.
I don't know.
Do you know the year?
Asked Ally as she knelt in the sand and felt the dry grains pass through her fingers.
No, I don't,
replied Sem, sounding even more annoyed than before.
Where should we start looking then?
Look,
shouted Sem. He threw the bag down in the sand next to the palm tree and pointed at her.
This isn't a fun time travel field trip to enjoy, all right?
Ally dropped the sand in her hand and looked at him with a blank expression, unsure of what she'd said to set him off.
Otto might like this idea or think it's just cute, but I don't. Matter of fact, I hate it. But if you're gonna help me find this person...
Traveler.
What?
You mean missing traveler?
Yeah. Now, don't correct the guide while the guide is speaking. If we're gonna find this missing traveler and get out of here in one piece, there are rules we have to follow.
All right,
replied Ally as she wiped the remaining sand off her hands.
1. We don't get involved in the affairs of this world. We don't know how it could affect this world or its future. And for all we know, it could have terrible consequences. We are just here to find who we're looking for and get out before anyone notices we're here. Got it?
got it.
Replied Ally with a nod and grin. Sem stared at her, his lips shaking.
2nd.
You mean 2?
Sem shot a cold, tense stare at her.
Sorry.
2. You do everything I say when I say. If I say run, you run. If I say hide, you hide. If I say anything else, you had better do it like you're trying to earn a gold medal. And 3rd, 3, don't talk to anyone. Let me do all the talking while you just stand there and smile. As a matter of fact, don't talk to me either. Got it?
Yeah, I think so.
You just broke rule number 3. You're already off to a bad start.
Sem turned around and walked over to the palm tree. He knelt to look through his bag, struggling to bend his injured leg. Ally looked at him, unsure whether he was just joking or being serious, or maybe both. Feeling she'd been made a fool of, Ally turned her back to his with her arms crossed and mouthed his rules with mocking emphasis.
Of course, they're buried at the bottom,
said Sem, pulling out the gold and silver bracelets he'd packed.
Here. Put this over your wrist communicator. Fits it so no one will think anything of it. Or us.
Guess that's probably a good idea.
Ally slipped the bracelet on. Sem pointed down at the ground near her feet.
All right. Now stay put,
said Sem. He reached into his bag again, pulling out a pair of binoculars. Ally stood by the palm tree and watched him as he made his way over to a small sand dune, where he laid down and looked through the binoculars. She watched him, then took the time to observe the small orb of light from which they had entered. Pacing a full circle around the silver star, she could see it sat suspended in space, glowing brightly, without a single sound. She waved her hand through it. The light passed through her hand. She didn't feel anything. It remained unchanged, suspended in the space in front of her. Satisfied with her investigation, she watched Sem stare through his binoculars. She wandered over to him and laid down on her chest at his side.
I said stay over there,
said Sem without bothering to look at her.
Over here sounded better.
Ally replied. Sem sighed.
There's a large caravan out there, following the river. Looks like a couple dozen men on horseback, probably headed for that city over there. Best guess is they might have seen our naked friend, or he or she might have made their way there by themselves.
Mind if I take a look?
Asked Ally. Sem handed her the binoculars. He stood up from the sand and limped back over to the palm tree. Ally put the binoculars up to her eyes and peered out over the horizon. She could see a parade of men in the dark vision of the binoculars, all drowsily making their way through the desert. Some held spears and round bronze shields, while a few carried red banners, and others on horseback rode with their helmets off. Ally turned her view in the direction they were going. Off in the distance, she could see a large border of stone walls surrounding a vast city. To the north of the city stood a large, stone, three-tiered temple with gardens on each level, each of which was decorated with trees, vines, and shrubs in an array of colors. Waterfalls flowed from the top level on all four sides, cascading over the gardens below and weaving their way in and out of the temple. Ally lifted her eyes away from the binoculars. The warm orange glow of the sun was beginning to rise over the desert in a dark pink hue, allowing her to see the cool, sandy colors of the temple with her own eyes.
No way,
she said, laughing to herself, looking through the binoculars again.
What?
Asked Sem, removing the goggles from over his head and placing them into the fabric bag.
There's no way.
What? Please share. I'm dying of suspense here.
Asked Sem with an edge in his voice.
You know which city that is, right?
Sem put the bag on the ground next to the palm tree and limped over to her.
No, O great and wise one. Please tell me.
That's the Hanging Gardens, which means that's Bablyon,
said Ally with a large grin on her face.
The what?
That means we're in what would be present-day Iraq, formerly Mesopotamia, sometime between the year 600 BC and 200 BC.
She replied, laughing with excitement. Sem just watched her with a blank expression. She looked through the binoculars once more, eager to see more.
Woo-hoo,
Sem muttered, sounding unenthused.
How is it you travel across different time periods and don't know your history?
My expertise was spent on survival, not history. Besides, that wasn't my area of expertise.
Wow, my dad would have loved this. He wouldn't even believe me if I told him.
Well, when you're done with your historical sightseeing, put your goggles and the binoculars in the bag, and let's get moving. Some of us have a world to save.
Sorry, just Bablyon,
said Ally, standing up in her trance, unable to look away. She put the goggles and binoculars in his bag as she continued to stare out at the majestic view. Sem's communicator beeped repeatedly. He lifted the bracelet cover off and pressed the accept button on the screen.
You guys make it in one piece?
Asked Otto over the communicator.
Yeah, everything's just peachy, Otto. Real great. There's a local caravan on its way to a city nearby.
it's Bablyon!
Yelled Ally at his communicator in excitement. Sem pulled his communicator away from her.
Yeah, we're in Babylon, apparently. So we may follow the caravan to see if we spot our missing person. By the way, if this doesn't go well, I'm reserving my right to say, I told you so.
Sem pressed the send button and placed the cover back over his communicator.
Why don't we just ask them?
Because I hate being social. It makes me ill even to think about.
It would be faster.
Sem turned to her.
Fine! Only if you agree to stay quiet. You've broken Rule 3 15 times already. We'll go ask if you'll just stay quiet. Please.
You've been counting?
Ally thought for a moment, looking over at him, confused. Sem began marching towards the caravan with Ally trailing along behind.
Wait, how do you expect to do that? They probably speak Akkadian or some other ancient language.
I don't have to know Akkadian. There's an earpiece attached to your communicator. Pull it out and put it in your ear. It'll translate anything you hear and vice versa.
What? No way.
Replied Ally, lifting the cover off her wrist communicator. Imitating Sem, she pulled the small, clear plastic earpiece out from the side of her red communicator and looked at it in her hand.
That's impossible. Okay, well, I guess I used to think a world in the sky wasn't possible, so today's just another day for firsts. But how do you guys pull that off?
Merrick, he has a gift for creating new technology. Was a gift for saving his life way back when. They'll never know we don't speak Babylonian.
Akkadian.
Said Ally as she put the earpiece in her ear.
Yeah, Academia, or however you say that.
Shouldn't we take the bag with us?
Not worth the risk. Now come on, and remember.
Sem stopped and pointed at her. Ally raised her hands up at her sides.
I know. Rule number 3, not a word.
That makes 19.
Said Sem as he hobbled onward toward the caravan. Ally shook her head and raised her shoulders, counting back on their conversation on her fingers as she followed him.
Excuse me!
Hollered Sem, approaching the caravan, waving his hand in the dawning light. The thunderous stomping of horse hooves halted as the leader of the caravan raised his hand. He turned his attention towards Sem and Ally, and he whistled loudly for the 5 men closest to him on horseback to follow his lead. The small squad broke away from the large caravan, their bronze armor shimmering in the silvering morning sunlight as they rode hard to meet Sem and Ally before they could come any closer. Sem turned to Ally.
Remember, not a word.
Ally nodded and made a gesture of zipping her lips closed.
Hold there!
The leader of the pack shouted as he towered over them on his gray horse. The 5 men circled Ally and Sem, their spears drawn and ready to strike. Ally could hear the man's words being translated into her right ear almost perfectly, while his spoken words sounded alien in her left.
State your business,
ordered the leader, looking down upon them. Dark, sleepless bags ringed his eyes as his light brown hair blew in the desert wind.
We are only travelers searching for our companions, sir,
said Sem with his hands in the air. Ally did the same with a smug face, still excited and baffled that all this was playing out before her like a Greek play.
Companion? By what means does one lose a companion in this barren wasteland? Explain yourself.
We come from far away in search of our lost companion who wanders without sanity of mind. We were given the task to see their safe return,
replied Sem. Ally glanced over at him with her brow raised. Sem had told the man the truth, which she hadn't expected. The question was now whether or not he would believe him.
What is your occupation? A scholar? A prophet? Or perhaps a liar?
Only a man tasked with helping those in misfortune. Not by choice, but for honor.
Misfortune? Perhaps you are the one who brings this misfortune to our lands. Perhaps ridding the world of you two would be doing a service.
Another rider approached them.
Perdiccas, silence your tongue before I part it from your mouth. I will not warn you again.
A man perched on a lavishly decorated and armored horse swept toward them. His long hair was a dark, dirty blonde, and his eyes a light bluish green. He spoke with a ruling and commanding presence over everyone.
I will not tolerate hostility toward travelers in my lands.
My lord, may I politely request you stay with the men?
Said Perdiccas as he bowed his head.
No. You lost your title as my ambassador after you battered that poor woman along the road who was asking for coin. Your words bring disgrace to my generosity.
Said the commander.
What plague does Perdiccas bring upon us now?
Said another tan-skinned man with short, dark hair as he rode up.
A plague of death upon you, Ptolemy, for insulting my authority.
Spat Perdiccas.
Enough! I will not have my two arms fight amongst each other.
Shouted the commander.
Now, sheathe your words, both of you.
But, my lord, they could be here to kill you.
Very little would be gained by my death now. Besides, I would thank them for offering such kindness as we embarked on our journey to the afterlife together.
Please don't say such words, my lord.
Replied Ptolemy. He lowered his head in grief.
'Tis true. Little is left for me but hope of life in Elysium. Now, enough of this dreadful talk.
The commander with blonde hair kicked his horse and made his way closer to Sem and Ally. He looked down at Ally as she tried desperately not to make eye contact. The men all lowered their spears. Sem and Ally rested their arms back down at their sides.
I wish to know what this beautiful flower is doing so far away from water.
She is my sister, my lord. A mute since birth,
said Sem. Ally looked over at Sem, wanting to punch him in the shoulder.
A mute. Sad. I'm sure whatever voice the gods blessed her with in that case was so alluring, Aphrodite was jealous enough to take it for herself.
Ally's face turned red at the compliment. She tried her best not to make a sound.
Tell us, from which lands do you come in search of this missing companion?
Asked Perdiccas, perching his fingers along the hilt of his sword. Ally looked over at Sem, expecting him to give another smooth response.
We come from...
Sem stopped mid-sentence. Ally could see the worry build on his face. He was desperately trying to name a place, but he had no names in mind. A drop of sweat rolled down his sideburn. Ally wondered whether he was sweating from the sun shining on his face or the tight spot he was now in.
Athens, my lord.
Said Ally, breaking her silence, feeling guilty for putting Sem in their current situation. She could now see he was a smooth talker, but not a very good liar. The men surrounding them laughed to themselves.
By the gods' grace, she is the most talkative mute I have ever heard.
Ptolemy chuckled. Sem looked over at Ally with wide eyes. His jaw tightened.
Or perhaps my own presence is enough to stir even the most silent into an uproar.
Replied the man with blonde hair.
Either way, I feel overjoyed to meet my own people so far away from home. What is your name, child?
Ally looked back over at Sem, wondering what to say. His gaze now told her to finish what she'd started.
Artemis, my lord. And this is my brother, Cyprus.
Said Ally, desperately pulling Greek names from her mind in hope they would seem legitimate.
Artemis? Bearing a name of a goddess would explain why you were left a mute. Well, the question now is why she let you speak.
I asked my brother to speak on my behalf. The sight of seeing my lord in the flesh silenced my voice.
She replied. Sem looked up at the man and shrugged in agreement. He was surprised how gracious Ally was in conversation, but he still expected things to turn ugly at any moment. The men all laughed again.
Well, let your voice be heard, then.
Said the man.
Tell me, do travelers such as yourselves always wear bloodied robes?
asked a man with short, braided hair sitting next to Perdiccas. He pointed down at Sem's leg with his spear. Sem looked down and noticed his leg had now bled through his pants and robe.
I was...
replied Sem, trying to conjure up an explanation.
We were attacked by raiders no more than 2 days ago.
Raiders?
Asked the man with blonde hair, his face now serious. He waved Perdiccas over to him. Perdiccas rode over to his lord's side.
Perdiccas, send out a battalion. I want those raiders found. I will not have travelers being attacked in my lands.
Yes, my lord,
replied Perdiccas in an irritated tone.
The men are tired. Let them rest before you send them out on this proposed raider hunt,
requested Ptolemy.
No. I will not tolerate barbarism, especially those preying on victims so close to home. They must be brought to justice.
Ptolemy looked Sem and Ally in the eyes, sizing them both up with a single stare.
Why would raiders attack a man and woman, only to leave the woman untouched?
Said the man with braided hair.
My brother hid me from the raiders, sir, while he fended them off. Unfortunately, our horse was killed in the attack,
said Ally, coming up with a quick lie. Perdiccas turned his horse around and began riding back toward the caravan.
He must be a skilled warrior. A rather experienced one, too, having only sustained a leg injury,
said Ptolemy.
Leave them be, Ptolemy. We've asked them enough questions. The city awaits, and they wish not for any further distractions,
said the man with blonde hair.
Sorry, my lord. I do not trust them, is all.
You're a great scholar and a dear friend, Ptolemy. But leave the judgment of character to me. Now, as token of my generosity, would you care to ride with us? Perhaps we can help you find this lost companion of yours. A humble welcoming gift and apology for your long journey.
No, my...
We would love to,
said Ally over Sem. Sem looked at her with a displeased expression. Ally ignored his stare.
Wonderful. Artemis, would you care to ride at my side?
Asked the man, holding his hand out to Ally. She felt mesmerized by his eyes and charm, and took his hand without hesitation. Sem continued to stand idly, watching her hop up onto the horse to sit in front of the man, his arms wrapped around her sides, holding the reins.
Seleucus, bring Cyprus a horse. The poor man has already suffered enough walking for a lifetime.
The man with braided hair who had brought Sem's injury to everyone's attention whistled to the caravan and waved. A soldier rode over, leading another horse by the reins.
Come now, let us ride. I grow impatient to see home. Seleucus, help Cyprus on his steed, and let's be on our way.
No, I'll be fine, my lord. Thank you,
said Sem as the soldier handed the reins to him. Sem hobbled alongside the horse and hopped on with one swift jump, appearing unaffected by his injury.
You're a strong man, unshaken by what ails you. I only wish my men could be so sturdy,
said the man with blonde hair, jokingly. Sem gave him a pathetic laugh, pretending to be amused.
Come, onward,
shouted the man as he led the group of horsemen back toward the caravan. Ally sat perched on the front of the maple-colored horse, her back resting against the man's finely decorated chest plate. Sem rode behind them with Ptolemy at his right, feeling more and more irritated with Otto's plan. The sun was now fully shining in the morning sky, and the grand walls of Babylon grew larger as they approached. As they drew close to the city, Sem scanned their surroundings to make sure no one was watching him. He lifted his bracelet cover just enough to look at his watch and see the time. 15 hours and 48 minutes left.
How long was your journey from Athens?
Asked Ptolemy as Sem slipped the cover back over his watch.
2 months, my lord,
said Ally. Ptolemy nodded with a look of astonishment.
Impressive. It took us far longer.
Indeed. However, they did not have that coward Darius standing in their way.
May he wander Hades for eternity, marked for his cowardice.
How long have you all been away?
Asked Ally, her curiosity growing. She reached forward and began petting the back of the horse's head.
Far too long.
Long enough to know we are meant to return home,
said the man with a mellow voice. He leaned to one side of Ally and noticed his horse seemed to lift his head back further for Ally to pet. Ally patted the soft-coated steed on the mane gently.
He likes you,
he said to her with a smile.
He's very beautiful,
she replied, sitting back upright.
Oh, Bucephalus has a resilient soul. He and I have traveled rather far together. Sad to say, his days are numbered, as are my own.
Ally thought for a moment. The pieces of a hidden puzzle began to slip into place in her mind. She had heard the name Bucephalus before, along with the names Ptolemy, Seleucus, and Perdiccas, though only now did she realize where from. Ally's voice softened with shock.
You're Alexander the Great,
she said under her breath.
The Great. Such a title sounds far too heroic to describe me,
replied Alexander.
The Great Alexander. I would say it is a title well suited to you, my lord,
replied Ptolemy.
Flattering, Ptolemy, but a king who turns away from his destiny and place in history is not worthy of such an honorable title. Greatness is to be left to those of noted worth.
Ally turned her head and looked at Sem, expecting him to be just as shocked and surprised as she was to be in the presence of the historical king. But Sem sat on his horse, listening to the conversation with an annoyed expression, unmoved by the moment. She turned back around and shook her head in disappointment. As they drew near to the outer city walls, the large wooden gates to the city creaked open. Alexander closed his eyes and took in a deep breath.
Sad as I may be, it is good to be home,
he said. The gates opened slowly with the clamorous sounds of the city beyond them. People stood at the roadside near the front gate, waving palm leaves through the air as they cheered, welcoming them home. Ally gazed at the city that surrounded her with a large smile on her face. The stone buildings towered over her as people waved at her from every window. Ally waved back, feeling like a queen. Sem did his best to give a smile every now and again, not enjoying the attention one bit. The group made their way up to the center of the city toward the Garden Palace, across a large central stone bridge, ultimately stopping to be greeted by a large audience of people, all dressed in their finest robes. The crowd bowed to the travelers and offered up bowls of lavish foods and flasks of wine. Alexander stopped his horse in front of the hanging garden palace. Ally stared up at the garden, observing the plant life that grew wildly all around its stone walls. Like giant stairs reaching to the sky, each step flowed, with trees all the way down to a moat that surrounded the luxurious palace. Ally took hold of the servant's hand, waiting to help her down from the famous steed. Alexander dismounted his horse and handed the reins to a servant waiting near the stairs.
Cyprus, Artemis, I would humbly request your presence at our feast tonight. Your company is most welcome at my table,
said Alexander.
We would be honored, my lord,
replied Ally with a huge smile on her face.
Excellent. Seleucus?
Yes, my lord,
replied Seleucus, walking over to Alexander.
Take Cyprus and Artemis to the market to buy aid for his wounds and any other supplies they may require. Inform the merchants that the wares will be paid for by me personally.
Thank you very much, my lord,
Ally replied as she clasped her hands together in gratitude.
It is my pleasure. I will have my men on alert in the streets in search of your missing companion, and hopefully have news for you later this evening.
Your generosity seems to know no bounds, my king,
said Ally, blushing. Sem rolled his eyes as he hopped down from his horse. Crippled by the pain in his leg, he stumbled to the ground. An older man reached down and grabbed him by the arm. The man helped lift him to his feet. Sem bent down and brushed the dirt from his robe, then stood back up and looked at the man.
I can handle myself. Thank you very much.
He stopped and stared at the man before him with a sudden, curious fixation. The man's face was covered by a thick sash wrapped around his head and mouth, but his pale blue eyes could be seen vividly in the sunlight, staring back at him. Sem looked at the man, stunned and in disbelief. He stared into the man's eyes, feeling his blood turn to ice in the desert heat as his breath escaped him. The man turned and casually walked away into the crowd of people surrounding everyone, without even taking a moment to look back. Sem just stood idle, staring at the crowd until he lost sight of the man. His heart was stopped by the chill of seeing a familiar ghost in the flesh before him.
Cypress, come on.
Said Ally. She patted him on the shoulder, trying to get his attention. Sem turned and looked at her, his face white and lost in the moment. Ally and Seleucus stood looking at him, waiting for him to respond.
Hey, are you all right?
Fine. I'm fine. Let's go.
Sem replied, shaking off the feeling, questioning if what his eyes just saw was simply a mirage. Yet, he would never be sure. Ally and Sem wandered through the streets of Babylon, packed with merchant stalls and shops as they were pervaded by the sounds of shouting salesmen. The smell of incense, cooked food, and rancid meat lingered in the air. Seleucus walked behind them, seemingly unamused with each step. Both Ally and Sem pretended to browse each of the shops, unsure of what to buy. Sem limped over to a small shop and pulled Ally alongside him, watching Seleucus over his shoulder. Seleucus stood at the entrance to the shop, scanning the crowd with his left hand tucked in his robe, and his right perched on the hilt of his sword. Watching Seleucus turn his back to them, Sem turned his back, pretending to look through the finely decorated pots sitting on a table in front of him. Ally stood next to him, looking through the pots and textiles on the table, genuinely interested in the decorations on each one. Ally turned and looked at Sem to see his lips pursed and his forehead scrunched. He stared directly back at her, scowling through his blue and brown eyes.
What's wrong?
She asked, looking through the pottery.
What's wrong? You're what's wrong for a start. Shh.
Ally replied, lifting a finger to her lips.
What's wrong? You did everything I told you not to do. I told you not to speak, and you spoke. I told you to follow my lead, and you did the exact opposite. I told you not to get involved in the affairs of this world, and you went out of your way to get us tangled up with a Roman emperor.
Sem replied in a softer voice.
King of Greece, actually. I guess he would be actually the king of Macedonia now as well, to be more specific.
Whatever. I don't give a flying fig.
Shh.
Replied Ally again, checking for eavesdropping ears around them.
I'm sorry. You looked like you were having trouble back there, so I figured I'd help out.
Sem leaned in closer to her and glared.
I have saved hundreds of people before you, and I have never needed anyone's help in the past year.
Sorry, I just figured it might not hurt to try things a different way for once.
Sem stared at her with a scowl.
That's not how this works. This is exactly why I don't socialize with people. Meddling with this world's timeline could have dire consequences on its future. For all we know, it could affect how long we have to find this person we're looking for.
Oh, great Scott.
What?
Nothing. It's just quoting a movie. Anyway, why did you bother taking my advice if you already knew what you were doing?
Sem fumbled around with his own thoughts, asking himself the same question.
That's not the point. Look, if we're gonna get out of here and find the person we're looking for, we need to stop everything right now before we make things worse.
What about Alexander?
Asked Ally, lifting a pot off the table and pretending to look at the black lion painted on it.
What about your Roman boyfriend?
He's Greek, actually.
Will you stop it?
Sem replied in a hushed tone.
Sorry, but we could use his help.
She said, setting the pot back down on the table. Sem shook his head with regret for ever agreeing to go along with Otto's idea.
Fine. He can help us find the person we're looking for. But that's it. End of discussion. If we're lucky, we might make it out of here alive.
Sem looked down at his watch as he slipped the cover back off and on.
We have less than 15 hours left.
All right, so let's find what we need and get out of here.
Well, I don't think there's anything here that can help me. But we'll have to buy something to make sure we don't look suspicious to this guy,
said Sem, checking to make sure Seleucus was still standing at the entrance.
And from now on, no more meddling. Got it?
Got it.
Replied Ally with a reassuring nod and grin.
Now, let's hurry up and buy something,
said Sem. He began to stroll through the shop looking for something to buy. Ally began browsing in the other direction. Ally meandered back toward the entrance, looking through each of the wares for a bandage or cloth, something that might help Sem's leg. Approaching the table near the window at the front of the shop, she found a small oil lamp and began rubbing it playfully, wishing a genie would appear. Laughing to herself, she caught a glimpse of a bearded man dressed in gray robes with a purple sash approach Seleucus in the busy street out front through the shop window. She could hear their conversation from the opposite side.
I've been looking for you all morning,
the man said to him.
Shh,
replied Seleucus, scanning the crowd ahead of him.
I've been preoccupied. Did you receive the letter?
Yes, and I think I have exactly what you need.
Ally set the oil lamp down on the table and stood on her tiptoes with her hands firmly placed on the table, peering out the window to get a better look at the mystery man. Above the sway of his robes, she noticed a faint, red burn scar on his neck, just below his chin. The man reached into his robe, pulled out a small, green glass vial, and handed it to Seleucus. Seleucus held it for a moment and looked through the dark glass at the clear liquid inside.
What is it?
The better question is what it does.
Very well. Explain,
demanded Seleucus.
Pour this into his wine, and a day later, a heat will swell inside of him hotter than the summer sun, that it will consume his body and voice, leaving him to rest with his eyes closed forever.
And no one will suspect it?
Not a soul. It'll seem like the gods themselves had cursed him.
Most excellent. Can it be cured?
Not even Orpheus himself could drag his soul back from death.
Good. It'll be good to be free from the once great Alexander. The council offers you their deepest thanks, my friend.
Ally lowered herself out of view of the window. With growing worry, she ducked down and shifted closer to the window to continue listening.
My pleasure. I assume the payment will be generous?
Yes. You'll have all of Greece in your debt. A king who forgets his loyalty to his own people does not deserve to be king.
Ally's breath quickened. She moved away from the window and shuffled her way back over to Sem's side. Sem stood browsing through the fabrics, looking for something to wrap his leg with. He noticed a pot of gray and silver powder on the shelf before him. He opened the top and sniffed the powder as Ally bumped shoulders with him. He turned and looked at her, confused.
What are you doing?
Sem, we have a problem. A big, really big problem.
Yeah, you're here. Tell me something I don't already know.
He placed the lid down on the table and took a handful of the powder in his hand, getting a closer look. He glanced over at her, still standing next to him, looking nervous. Ally bit her lip with her upper teeth.
What have you done now?
Sem asked, growing suspicious. Ally looked back over her shoulder to see Seleucus shake hands with his mysterious friend through the window.
Remember what you just said about no more meddling in affairs?
Hello, everyone. My name is Harrison Bullman. I'm the voice of Ptolemy from Sem Adventures Across Time. If you've enjoyed being on this adventure with us so far, please go check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/TS Wieland. With your support, you'll gain early access to the next chapter of the book and a copy of the book itself. Your contribution helps bring together all the dedicated voice actors and artists from across the world, including myself, who put together these thrilling and inspiring audiobooks. All of us here in the World Between Worlds would like to say thank you for joining us on our adventures. I look forward to seeing you again soon.